Hey everyone, this is the Heroes Podcast. I'm so happy to be with Antoniette Roze today. How are you?
I'm well, Andre. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming. And before we go into your story, I wanted to introduce you to everyone so they know who I'm meeting with. Very special person. Ro- Antoinette is architect, speaker success beyond bookings, building solid and lasting foundations. As a strategist, consultant, and agent, Antoniette tailors plans for speaking prosperity, abundant engagements, memorable brands, global impact, celebrated for transforming hidden gem thought leaders into household names. Antoniette doesn't just book gigs, she forges legacies. Oh, I'm so excited. So, from strategy to stage, she partners with you to amplify your voice, maximize your success, and ensure lasting impact. Ooh, probably I need this conversation most than anyone else. So I'm so excited. Tell us, Antoniette, and be careful with your name. How did this all start? I guess you have not been, you were not born as a speaking strategist. Do you want to tell us the pains and struggles that you have been through?
You bet. And it really goes back quite a ways, Andre. And same here. I really want to get your name right. I love cultures, and I think names are a really important part of that. So mine begins as a young girl when I was diagnosed with late stage cancer and was basically told that uh, there was no chance of my survival. And so my family was basically instructed to send me home, take me to Disneyland, just basically say our goodbyes. Um,
Oh,
Luckily, fortunately, there was a team of university doctors that heard about this young girl that was being sent home, and they petitioned for me, basically to experiment on me. But it really opened my eyes to outside of the box thinking when it comes to possible solutions, right? So I proceeded to spend the next year solid and then another year on and off in this children's ward of this very large university hospital. And in my ward, there were all kinds of children. There were children with kidney disorders, with anorexia, leukemia, and of course, cancer. And so I was in an area where the other children with cancer would come into, and I was hundreds of miles away from my home. I had actually lost my father a couple of years before that, and my mom was left with four of us children, two of them baby twins to care for on her own. So I was hundreds of miles away from my family, and they couldn't really get there to see me very often during that time. So those kids obviously became my family. And, as they would come into the children's ward, they looked normal, like me. They looked like a normal kid. But the lucky children who got the quote unquote right treatments soon did not look so normal. They become often unrecognizable. They would get very, very swollen. They would lose their hair and they'd get boils. Their gums would hurt so badly that they could barely eat. And I would hear their groans at night. It was just very, very difficult to witness that. I don't know if you can really ever get over that. And I remember thinking, well, I still feel normal. I didn't walk for 2 years. I didn't really walk because the cancer had eaten away my pelvic area. But at least I could eat and I wasn't in horrible pain. And that triggered the whole rest of my life. Just that question of why weren't their parents told that maybe there were some other things they could try first, like me? Obviously I didn't know the politics of it all. I didn't understand that they wouldn't, quote unquote, experiment on a child who might be healed by the more mainstream approach. But that question never left me. I got to leave that hospital, and by all rights, I shouldn't have. And those luckier children never got to see They never got to step into the rest of theirs. And so I pretty much vowed at a pretty young age that I would do whatever was within my power to make sure that at least people have the knowledge of their options before they make a big life decision, right? Whether it's in health and well-being or if it's in performance or job, whatever it might be, that you know all of your options. Put it on the table and you get to choose. You get to choose what's right for you, not somebody else, not a white coat, not, I don't know, some advisor, but that you get all the information and you get to make that decision. And that really shaped my whole career. I didn't go into medicine. I knew I didn't want to do that. So instead, I went into business management, computer information systems back in the 80s, where to turn on a computer, you had to put in a code, and um, marketing and public relations. And with that, yes, go.
I was just thinking before you go into that, I mean, this whole story was giving me goosebumps. I felt like, how old were you then, going through this experience of literally losing children ongoing because they were not healed? Is this what happened?
Right. So in this children's ward, there were really young children to teenagers. I was a young preteen, so 12, 13, 14 was when I was kind of going through all of that.
And what, like, I understand this. I work with so many people, and it's so much trauma that people go through. What was it that you felt when you were exposed to this experience that you probably have not even understood properly?
You know, at first, as a child, at first, it was a little bit exciting. All of a sudden, all my family was coming from everywhere and they were, all around me. And that part was a little bit exciting. And you don't, what's told to me as the child versus what's told to my mother and my family was very different, right? So I don't know that I knew the real breadth of what was taking place at first. So then as the reality set in, I remember this is back in the was it late 70s, early 80s. Hospitals were a lot different back then. And so my hospital room happened to be where the window was open and you could really just step right outside my window to the roof. There was just this roof. And so I remember thinking several times I could deal with the pain. I had a very high tolerance of pain, which is why they caught the cancer so late, which was a gift in disguise, obviously, because then I didn't go through the traditional, route. But I remember thinking I can deal with the pain. I just don't want to be here. And I had contemplated stepping out that window and just going and exploring and just going. I kind of knew there was something imminent that was going to happen, and I didn't want to be there when it happened. The only reason why I didn't is because of my mother, right? What that would have done to her. So I don't know what I was feeling other than this can't be happening. I've got too much still ahead. So you do, even as a child, know that this can't be the last chapter. I'm just beginning to write the book. I'll share with you a really quick little vignette. When I was in the university hospital, the way that the cancer was, there was a real danger of me bleeding to death. And so they couldn't put me to sleep on certain surgeries. And so there was this one particular surgery where it was a university hospital. So I was laying there, I was fully awake. Of course, they locally, numbed and all of that. But there was a big screen kind of above my head of everything that was happening. And then the room was lined with these interns watching the procedure. And it was very, very frightening, obviously, and painful. I could feel a lot of what was happening. And so I didn't want to see the screen, and I didn't really want to see all the people in the room. So I just turned my head because, my hands were secured, like I had nothing I could really do. And I sang through the whole through the whole procedure. Um, I sang hymnals like Amazing Grace, my father's favorite, and Jesus Loves Me, all the different hymnals that I had known. And by the time we left that whole scenario, everyone was in tears. And I was wheeled out to the hallway, and it was very emotional. There's a lot of emotion in the air from all of those interns to the doctors and obviously to me. And when they sat my mom and I out there waiting to hear from the doctor, and when the doctor finally came out, he said, I don't think he gave very good news, and my mom started crying. I don't remember the whole thing. But what I do remember vividly is this man wheeling himself past us, and he had a shaved head and all these scars in his head. And later, when we were eating in the cafeteria, I think this was a couple days later, I was actually sitting up and in a wheelchair. This same man came and found us in the cafeteria. And he said, "I'm sorry to intrude, but I really wanted to just share a story with you." And he proceeded to share his miracle story and how there's hope when it seems like there is no hope. Anyway, it was so impactful that those man's words, he probably didn't even span more than 3 to 5 minutes. How all these decades later still have an impact on me. Just those few kind words. And so stepping into this career to making sure voices are heard, because I know the power of them, and that it's not just a luxury to get your solutions out there, it's a mandate. It's your job, right, to get your message out there as far and as wide as you can. And so becoming an first event producer, large scale event producer, and now speaker agent was really a natural progression for me.
What a touching story. Uh, your life hanging by a thread. I'm wondering from a mindset point of view. Sorry to keep going back there, but how did you process this at all? This whole almost dying and then away from family. Did you have psychological help? Did you see therapists or how did this even you looking pretty good like when I come across most people uh they have lost themselves in the experience. How did you do this?
That was a real deficit, Andre. It really was a deficit. I should have had someone there asking me how I was, especially since my family couldn't be with me. But it was really a solo journey. Those other children became my rock. There was this one tiny little girl with a pretty major kidney issue, and her family had abandoned her. And she was so beautiful. She would go bed to bed every single day and just stroke your hair, touch your skin, and just say the sweetest, kindest things. I remember her name felt really big for how tiny she was, and she had a kidney issue, so she was older than she looked, right? But I don't remember if it was like Michelle or what it was, but I remember her name feeling so big because of her impact. I remember her face, and I remember thinking, how could her parents not want to be here for every second of what she was going through? And all of that to say that again, those little kind words, it just dying wasn't an option. That the end wasn't an option. So I chose my option, right? I chose what was negotiable and what was not negotiable. And dying was not negotiable, right? I was going to live. And so I would do things that organically I couldn't even explain. It just felt right. Like the nurses would bring me pain medication on the clock constantly, and I would hide them and throw them away. I knew somehow at that young age that I needed my body on full alert and fully able to heal myself. So I don't know where that came from other than the love for my family. I had been in foster homes prior to that. After losing my dad, me and my siblings were put in foster homes until my mom could get back on her feet. And so it was we had just gotten back together and then I was torn away again. And I was just like, no, I got to get back there. We worked so hard to get back together. It's just like what you'll accept and what you won't accept. And I wouldn't accept anything other than living and being with my family.
Well, the story just blows me away. Foster homes. Tell me, how did you find out this career path? You've told us that you wanted your story or help people get their stories out, and I think these are the most powerful things today and all the time, to have inspiring stories. But as a business, have you just zeroed on that's what I'm going to do, or were there a mentor? How did you make this shift to help stories out, help speakers to step up and impact, wide or large amount of audiences?
It was really an evolution, like one step, and it just kind of became. So the one thing I knew is I wanted everybody to know what their best options were, right? And that your best option, Andrea, was be different than my Antoniette's best option, and that you should have the power of the knowledge to make your best choice, right? And so should I. So that I knew. I didn't know what that looked like, but I knew I needed to have some part in that. I am a person who does not happen to love the spotlight. I am very reclusive by nature. I love human beings, but I'm a research nerd. I can get lost in research for weeks, right? And never even realize I hadn't talked to a human. So I'm not one that thrives in the spotlight. So that wasn't my natural first thought. But what happened was right out of college, just so happened a friend of mine had moved off halfway across the United States to this opportunity, this university. And it was a faith-based university. And he messaged me out of the blue about a half year later. Hey, I was walking through the magazine department and your name kept pounding through my head. Is this anything you might be interested in? I'm like, no, I was a single mom. I was just graduating college. I'd already had a job lined out. But it didn't leave me. It kept, and my son had some godparents. We were out to lunch one day and I happened to mention it to them. They're like, just check it out. Here, we'll buy your ticket. You just go check it out. We'll watch your son. So I came and checked it out and I realized, okay, this place is super foreign to me and it's felt like a million miles away from my family. But I went ahead and I gave it 3 years. I said, okay, I could do this. It's going to be like a university outside of the university. I'll do this. And I stepped right into publishing. And that wasn't on purpose. It wasn't really what I had planned to do, but I loved it. I loved it because people got their stories out and they were just fascinating stories, often of triumph and helping other people and solutions that people lay awake praying for at night, right? So I really, really loved that. And then that kind of evolved into me. I wound up accidentally opening a bed and breakfast that wound up becoming a bed and breakfast and 2 retreat centers. And so I would actually open up the space one to 3 times a month, just depending, for these mini workshops. And back then it was all about natural health, not natural wellness. And I outgrew my facility. And so I rented a community center, very large one, like a really nice rose garden community center, outgrew that. Then it was convention centers. And then I was like this all of a sudden I was this producer of large scale events, and that was pretty incredible. And big names were coming to me, and that was amazing, except I was killing myself. Those were really, really hard jobs. And the places that the big offers of sponsorships were not in alignment with my values. I mean, I know a lot of people love Chick-fil-A, but I don't really consider them a health food. They wanted to sponsor. Please, nobody get mad at me for saying that, especially in Texas. And um, and then, you know, hospitals and pharmaceutical companies wanted to sponsor those kinds of things. But the sponsors I really wanted didn't have those kinds of pockets. And so it meant doing that with a skeleton crew and me working around the clock. And as my grand beauty count began to rise, we're over a dozen now of grandchildren that I love so much that, and my mom's health started to decline. So I wound up having to close down the retreat center so that I could make space for her, and it's not only physical space, but space to be able to tend to her care. I had to make some big decisions. And so letting go of the events was a really hard, big decision, but I didn't want to let go of the vision. So the next obvious step would be was already putting amazing people on stages. And of course, because of my backstory, I love the hidden gems. I love the ones who have those solutions and those answers that aren't widely known quite yet. And so I had become known for that in the production space. And so I stepped right into that to continue to put those kinds of speakers on stages. But now it wasn't my stages, it was other people's stages. And that's where I am today.
Wow. I can't believe still that you just dropped these massive challenges, single mom, that really hit my ears, and then running retreats by accident, opening up bread and breakfast. You got some unbelievable stories that could maybe make space for another time. But so the way you help speakers now, I thought if somebody listening to us would want to take their speaking to the next level, how does the ability to spread compelling message impact a person's long-term success? Could you point us to the right direction?
Yes, excellent question, Andre, because I believe that it's so undervalued, right? It's like I've got to look at my ad budget. I have to hire a publicist to get a book out, you know, whatever it might be. And you skip over the most important part, and that is simply getting your voice out there in a way that only you can, Andre. This show, nobody, you could sell the show tomorrow and nobody's going to deliver it the way you do and with your heart and your spirit and your background and your point of view. Only you have your voice, and it can never be duplicated. Someone else might be able to get a similar concept across, but they're never going to attract and reach people the way that you are, that you, only you are. And I know that can sound grandiose, but it's true. Nobody can step into my voice. Nobody can step into your voice. And so when you've been given the gift, right, of this knowledge, whether it's curated over decades of working in a certain subject matter, or maybe you had a traumatic experience that you could only be you're the only one that can show how you stepped through that, whatever it might be. It's not a nice have in my book. It's a necessary, it's a mandate that you get that message out there, because there is many someones who are laying awake at night in tears, and all just one sentence from you can change the course of everything. It might stop them from making a drastic decision, like leaving their family or leaving the planet, you know, whatever it might be. Or it could just give them that one missing link that can get them to the next level so they can see the light of day and be able to take it from there. Or they might be doing amazing and you give them a little something and it skyrockets them to impact even more people. So whether you're building a business, building a concept, building a nonprofit, or you just want to do good in an area, your voice is the number one. If you never spent, and I'm not saying don't buy advertising because it can be very, very powerful. But if you had to choose, if you could only choose one thing, write a book, buy advertising, or just start talking, talk. Just start talking.
And if we go back to go deeper here, like what do you recommend a person could do to amplify that voice, to be able to connect with, broader audiences? How tell us the secrets?
Yeah. So it might seem a little counterproductive for me to say, don't think a speaker agent is the answer because I am a speaker agent. But it's really not. A speaker agent is a tool. They are somebody who's going to come alongside you, hopefully, if they're a good one, link arms with you and get you further faster. But they can't drag you. And not a lot of those who are just like, I'm an expert in this area. I need to speak. I'm going to get an agent and they're going to do it for me. Those are the ones that get really disillusioned very quickly because basically you are on the bench quite a long time unless you're doing a lot of your own legwork. So me and my team does more than the most, right? We not only develop the host checks, the host side of speaking, from what I'm talking in terms of revenue, but also the audience side of speaking, because not only does that increase revenue, but also impact. And I think that that's really important. Most agents won't do that because it's not as profitable. And so when you're looking at bureaus and agencies, I'm not saying don't do it because they definitely have their value in place, but they're not the end all be all. A lot of times what happens is you get accepted. If you do get accepted, usually you already have to have done a lot of your own legwork. You have to prove that you're already being paid $10, $15, $20,000 a talk on a pretty regular basis for an agency to even look at you. But let's say you plunk down some big dollars and sorry about that. You plunk down some big dollars and you decide that you are going to buy into a bureau, right? Essentially, you are put on a shelf on display with many other also amazing speakers. And it's really difficult. I mean, you can have some pro clips on there, some promotional clips, but it's really difficult to differentiate yourself. And even with agents, let's say, a given agent is only on commission based. I don't love that model because of this and other reasons. It's just human nature. If Fred is already commanding $45,000 a talk and you're still maybe fairly new and you're only commanding $15,000 a talk, and an engagement comes into the agency and it's can fit either one of you, I mean, who's the agency going to
Commission.
promote? Yeah. So you sit on the bench when you may have actually been the better choice for that engagement. And I remember seeing that happen quite a bit when I was on the other side of it, looking for the right speakers for my stages and being sent the ones that weren't really the perfect fit. They just happened to be the more profitable speakers. So all of that to say, whatever you do, don't think it's going to be done for you. Find somebody to link arms with you that you trust and who gets you and who has passion about your passion way more than the dollar sign, right? That they really believe in your message and they're as passionate or close to as passionate about your message as you are. But don't hang your hat on that. Let them be your help and even your guide to some level, but know that only you can get your voice out there. And at the beginning, I know a lot of speakers are like, I'm not going to speak for free. Well, number one, no talk should ever be free if you're doing it right. You're either getting checks from the audience or you're getting checks from the host. And the audience checks are usually way bigger. Like let's say it's a $20,000 gig, right? Engagement. Great. That's a great payday from the host. But that audience, just 3 new clients from that audience can be $100,000 or more based on, what you have. That's a much better payday. It doesn't come as instantaneously, but it can come pretty quickly done right. So instead of deciding if a speaking engagement is good for you based on what you're getting paid, decide based on, am I going to be in front of enough right fit faces? If you're in front of enough of those perfect fit clients, right, potential clients, then that is an audience you should even pay for if you have to. For instance, if I can get on one of JJ Virgin's stages, you pay a lot to get on her stage, but oh my goodness, I would do it because I know I'd be in front of a lot of right fit faces, and just even 5 clients would more than pay, not only for what I paid to get on the stage, but for my time. And yeah, there's way more benefits to speaking than just that host check.
And what gets me to the point of, so if I believe these gigs and presentations and public speaking engagement, they really fit into the profile that one is, and hopefully there comes a point when life purpose meets speaking, and that inner sense of, well, I'm making a difference, and obviously then I will need to talk to the right people to leverage that change that I'm trying to bringing into this world. Then comes legacy. And what would be, so when we go to legacy mode or legacy building, then what kind of strategies or steps are necessary to make that happen when one is stepping into that level of impact?
Right. Okay, that's such a good question, because that's a foundational question. When you are in a place where you're sharing your story or you've got this body of knowledge to share, we have so much to offer, right? That we can often confuse our audience. So two parts to the answer to that question as we wind down here. Number one, make sure that you know what your message is. So and everybody talks about their signature talk. I talk about a signature brand, and you always snap back to that signature brand. And in that brand can be 100 different talks, but it has to be true to that core brand. Because when somebody says your name, Andre Hoffman, it has to synonymously snap to, oh, he's the doctor of self-worth, and he's amazing at it, and that's what he's good at. And if I want that, he's the only answer, right? He's the one I'm going to go to. Instead of, he's amazing. I've always wrote, but I'm not, I think you can talk on a lot of different things, completely different, and you will not rise to the level of celebrated thought leader or sought after influencer, right? Because you have to specialize. And it doesn't mean you don't get to share your other things. It just always has to snap back to that core brand. That's the one thing. So a confused mind doesn't buy. So always make sure that it's crystal clear what you're about. And then the other thing is, don't try to dump too much too soon. A talk is really the first step in a journey. It's not, don't pour the whole pot of pasta on everybody's heads. Because what do people do when they're full, right? You do not want to leave your audience saying, thanks, but not one more bite, please. No, I just can't do it. It was great. I loved it, but can't do it. That's the last way you want to leave your audience. You want to give them just enough nourishment to digest it, feel the transformation that it brought, and say, wow, Andre brought some goods. Like, he made such a difference in just 45 minutes. I need more. Where's my second bowl of nourishment coming from, right? And it should be the first step in a journey versus you try to get it all in that one-off talk.
Yes, what I gathered from this is really shaking them a bit or touching their heart, so they finally stop in their distraction patterns that most people are. And finally, be able to be present and listen. So how do you guide speakers through the journey from, let's say, where they are to prosperity and a larger impact?
Number one, we figure out their ecosystem because we want to make sure that we don't build a castle that they don't want to live in, right? How many people have you heard about and even witnessed the demise of, who they seemingly have it all? They're highly successful. They've got all the money in the world. They've got the mansion. They have everything, and they are on their fifth divorce, and they're in the news for substance abuse issues, or whatever it might be. And that's because they just kind of hit the ground running and they never calibrated along the way. They might have set out right, but new level, new you. Each time you reach a new milestone, you've got to relook at the basics, the foundation, and micro calibrate, because the view changes, you change, your audience changes. As you evolve, so does everything else around you. And if you're not staying in tune with that, you're going to wind up probably still building something great, but something that's going to make you really resentful and miserable, because it's not. You may have been envisioning a cabin in the woods with a river running right alongside, and all of a sudden you're on the beach, a windy, sandy beach, right, in this mansion that just sucking all your time and energy. I don't know, maybe that's your dream. But that's the analogy is, make sure to keep checking in. So I do attract pretty well-known names, and I always take them back to the basics. And I've gotten some pushback for that at first. Once they go through it, they realize, I see the wisdom in that. I see how important that is. And I say good, because we're going to be doing it every new milestone, and that's generally at least 4 times a year. So I think that to skip that is a very, very big mistake.
So what are these milestones? You brought them up a few times, and obviously I work with people and I'm familiar with what milestones are, but what are milestones in your industry? Is a certain number of, I don't know, is it a figure that people earn, or is it the impact they make, or the number of the audience?
It's
Tell me.
different. Yeah, it's different for each person. So your milestone might be, I need to get to $50,000 a month. And so that might
Mm.
be a milestone for you. Or it might be, I want to step out of this day-to-day profession that I'm in, and I want to step more into full-time thought leadership, right? And so one milestone might be that you get a certain number of engagements that then warrants you stepping back from your other mainstay. So for one of the very first things I do with my clients is, we have our launch session is all about the ecosystem. And I get really granular into not you today, not who Andre is today, but where he sees himself, is if all things were perfect and, perfectly aligned, where would you see yourself 3 years from now? And I'm always working in numbers of 3, whether it's 3 months, 3 years, sometimes 3 hours. But that you're not just, yes, stay in the moment, right? This moment is precious and powerful, but also you want your future self to thank your current self for being hyper vigilant in making sure you're going in the right direction.
That's very insightful, and I'm glad that I hear 90-day cycles work in your industry as well as in business. So where could someone listening to us find information? Have you got a website? What's the best way to engage with you?
Yeah, I do. Actually, 2 ways at this point. One, if you have even the slightest inkling that you've got a message that needs to be heard, um, or you are a producer that has incredible experiences that you can help others get heard through, right? If you are an event producer, a show producer, whatever it might be, then go to speakerbooker.com, speakerbooker.com, and set up a time to have 20 minutes with me. I would love that. I'd love to hear your story, your vision, and the impact that you want to make. So that's really first and foremost. Let's get together for about 20 minutes. The other thing is I'm actually starting my own show. I don't know when this one airs, but in February of 2024, I'm launching my own show, and that's speakpact.com. Speak Pact, like impact, PACT.com. And so definitely follow us there. And there's going to be all kinds of great resources and ways to get your career to the next level, whether you are a speaker or a producer.
Wonderful. Are you doing this alone or yourself, or are you bringing in experts? And is it going to be a bit of a podcast setup or interviews?
Right. It will be, podcast will also be on YouTube. So it'll also be video content. And I'm definitely bringing in other speakers, actually other very well-known influent voices in the influencer space. And then also those who in media and in HR and those engagements that you're just like, how do I crack the code? How do I get past the gatekeeper? How do I get these gigs, right? And so they're going to be kind of giving you some of those high level insider insights on how to do that.
What would you be celebrating in 5 years' time if things went well for Antoniette Roze? Where would you see yourself?
I would see myself with a team who is flourishing. Like, not only do they love their work and they know the impact that they're making, but that I'm also able to really give them that kind of lifestyle through what they're getting paid for the good work that they're doing. That means a lot to me. As an Italian, right? The whole family has to thrive for me to feel like I'm thriving myself. Number one. Number two, absolutely knowing that I could not count the number of lives that are being impacted through the work that's being done through my life and efforts, right? And then last but certainly not least, plenty of time for those grand beauties I told you about, and for exploration and being able to see parts of the world, even just parts of the United States that I haven't yet gotten to explore.
Wonderful. What? So you still identify as an Italian. I caught that one. Do you still have family back there in Italy, or are you still visiting Italy regularly, or what is your connection now?
I am third generation, and when my family came over on the banana boat to Ellis Island, um, they Americanized us very quickly, just to integrate. Back in those days, it was not lovely to be an Italian, and so opportunities were very limited. So they Americanized us pretty quickly, and we lost a lot of our culture and our language and our connection with the old country, what my family calls it. So my son has backpacked Italy, and he has really gotten to experience the culture. I unfortunately have not. We've got a church named after us there. We have a lot of families still there, but we're very far removed. So from New York, my family migrated to Los Angeles, and that's where I grew up, and I've really only known America.
Hmm. So tell me, what have I not asked you today that I should have or could have asked you that you wanted to share with us, but I've missed a few things? Tell me.
Oh, you've been an incredible interviewer. Let me think. It's going to be a hard one to. Okay, how about this? Well, I'm not the greatest speaker, right? Self-doubt. And a big part of your show, who that I love, the Heroes podcast. It's such an amazing show. You speak about that self-worth and self-doubt, and missed potential, those kinds of things. And I think we limit ourselves often. I I guess the question would be, what about that person that just doesn't know? They may not think they have much special to offer, right? I say shame on you. I say it's not about you. It's not about you. It's about those who need what it is you have to offer. So when you take the focus off yourself, I'm talking to myself because I still don't love putting myself in front of audiences. I much more prefer putting you guys in front of audiences. But again, only I can deliver my message, right? And so the way I get myself out of my own head is to think about the person, the one person in that audience who absolutely needs to hear what I have to say. I don't think about the crowd. I think about that one person. And that's who I speak to when I'm on a stage. And so don't limit your own impact and your own legacy because of I don't know, your own hookups, hangups, whatever it might be.
Mm. Absolutely. Limitations, guys. You've heard from the master. Ask yourself, who needs me out there today? And then grab the mic. Well, thank you very much for your time. I really loved this conversation. It was very deep and very touching. And I know it's going to help a lot of people because this now will start its own journey in a few weeks' time. And who knows how far it will go. I expect a minimum of 5 continents where people learn about what they're worth it. Their story is worth it. And they will give themselves a chance because that's what we are here about. Thank you very much again. It was wonderful to meet today.
Thank you, Andre. It was such a pleasure to be with you. Ciao, ciao for now.
Thanks. Ciao.